myself included, yes. Oh, and that book got written and a title was chosen, became the name of our fellowship. And finally, after such a long struggle, our word began to receive much wider distribution. Well, you see, now, when the inquiries came in, all we had to do was send out a book. We didn't have to make all those personal contacts. Oh, yes, our society grew, and it continues to grow, all because of that book. Well, here, this book. Oh, and it was the cause of a terrible Donnybrook between Bill and me. Our first real fight since his recovery. All had to do with ego, my ego, wrapping itself around another bout of self-righteousness here. All had to do with this chapter, 2 wives. You see, it'd been my understanding right from the very first discussion of the book's outline that when we got to this part, of course I would write it. Who else? I was perfect for the job. It was a foregone conclusion. When Bill got to this, the task would be assigned to me. Well, it never happened. Bill wrote that. When I finally went to him and asked if they weren't about ready to have me start writing, I was informed that it had already been done. Oh, I was furious. Bill didn't understand my reaction. You see, I'd never expressed any desire to write this chapter. I had just assumed that when they got to it, of course, the job would be given to me. Assume. Or what is it they say about that word, assume? The first 3 letters? Ass. Well, that's just what I'd gone and done, made a total ass of myself. And to make matters worse, I wouldn't budge. Oh, that must have lasted a week. I was cool as a cucumber. My God, I was perfect for the job. Who else could do it better? Well, once again, when I was ready, the grace of God penetrated my heart. One day when I was taking an inventory, I realized I was the least qualified to write that chapter. That was hard to take. But thank God I bowed to the truth. Now, what was it I wrote? Let me see. A little further on. Here we are. Many members were writing their stories on drinking and recovery. Most of them came from the Akron area, and a local newspaper man helped them, so their stories were better written than most. At about the same time, I was growing in the realization that a loving, understanding wife could support her husband's newfound sobriety. You know, Bill and I were often puzzled and saddened by the failure of many families to maintain their happiness. Here, after the initial joy of recovery, that pink cloud period, the distortions in the families of recovering alcoholics began to appear. So we felt it was of extreme importance that the wives learn as much as possible about the disease of alcoholism to help them rearrange their thinking. You know, I think that brings us to the beginning of the family programs. Yes, here are the notes on that. At its outset, AA was a family affair. Well, whole families attended the meetings. Most of them were held in private homes. Many of us didn't even have any homes. We lived together. Well, times were tough, and I guess all of us were getting a little desperate. The Depression still gripped this country, you see. But out of that national despair, our program of hope kept us going and growing. Many of the wives were able to use the program for their own spiritual growth, their own peace. Many did not. You see, as yet, there was nothing to help them understand feelings and reactions to their spouse's successes, and more often than not, their failures. There was very little sharing of experiences. So out of that void, the family program grew. The seeds of Al-Anon came alive as family members of the early AAs began to witness their own recovery, began to do something about it. Annie, Dr. Bob's wife, well, she'd been active in the Oxford group before he met Bill. how she'd long recognized her need for a spiritual program for herself. Well, just as I did after throwing that shoe. So, whenever we got together with other wives, we shared our need to follow the same program as our husbands, and how the principles of the program, which later became our 12 steps, interacted in our lives. So, after 6 years, that was 1940, we began to organize our movement. It was at our AA clubhouse in New York. When the AA members, feeling the need to meet alone, gathered in the assembly room, the wives would get together in the studio up above. You know, at first we played cards, but in time, here, we began to share our experiences. Well, it was there I first told my story. Oh, it was there we discovered we all shared similar experiences. It was also there we found out we were not alone. In time, we wives were joined by our members' sisters, mothers, and daughters. Soon it would be brothers and fathers. And finally, oh, this is of utmost importance, we were joined by family members of people who were not as yet in AA. Oh, these were people without hope. It was wonderful. Well, here, for the next several years, Bill and I traveled around the country visiting AA groups. Well, when asked, I told our story. I shared the joy the program had brought into my life. Well, here's what I wrote. The family program grew and grew and grew. We were no longer coffee and cake groups. No, we met to develop our own spirituality. The 12 steps were becoming our spiritual anchor. In 1949, Ruth G., oh God bless her, Ruth began the Family Forum magazine, and she distributed it to any known family group. The articles it contained became the focus of many discussions. Now, that was exciting. Well, during Bill's trip around the country, that was 1950, he was amazed to discover many family groups up and running. So on his return, he suggested we establish a service office in New York. Oh, to be honest, I must admit, I wasn't very interested. Oh, well, we had just moved into this house. The first house we'd ever owned, and all I wanted to do was work in the garden and make things I thought the house needed. Oh, yes. We ex-saints can be very selfish. Very selfish indeed. So, here, it was a full year later, 1951, that action was taken. After the AA General Service Conference, I asked the wives of the attending delegates to meet with me and other AA wives here at Stepping Stones. As it turned out, all but 2 or 3 belonged to family groups. So it was then that I decided to open a service center. And I asked Ann B., to help me. Annie, Bob's wife, oh, she died about 3 years early. Oh, God bless and keep her beautiful soul. She was such a dear friend. Now, we worked right here, upstairs. Working from a list given to us by the AA General Service Office, we wrote to the then known 87 non-alcoholic individuals or family groups that had written to AA, asking for literature and a listing in the National Directory. AA didn't really think they should be listed, as all their efforts were geared to helping the alcoholic, not the family. So, in our letter, we stated the intended purpose of the family group to be threefold. 1, to give understanding and cooperation to the AA at home. 2, to live by the 12 steps ourselves in order to grow spiritually along with our AA. And 3, to welcome